It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. A fairy tale wedding, vows whispered under the golden hue of a sunset, promises of love, honor, and respect. But little did she know, the man she had vowed to spend forever with was about to humiliate her in the most demeaning way possible. Can love truly turn into mockery in the blink of an eye? Comment below where you're watching from. Let's hear your thoughts on this shocking moment. The celebration was in full swing. The scent of rich wine and delicate pastries lingered in the warm night air, mingling with the sounds of jubilant chatter. Champagne bubbled in crystal flutes, and the flickering glow of candlelight cast playful shadows across the joyous faces of guests lost in the rhythm of music. For a moment, it felt like a dream, a night where love was the melody and laughter was the chorus. But then, like an unexpected storm on a cloudless day, the moment shifted. A voice cut through the mirth, a voice she had vowed to cherish forever. Her husband's voice, a voice that once whispered love, now laced with something else. "Dance for us," he said, his tone playful, yet edged with an unspoken demand. A request, simple on the surface, but the weight of expectation sat heavy in the air. She hesitated. A strange, creeping unease coiled around her heart, tightening its grip. Was this a jest, a light-hearted moment between newlyweds? Or was it something more sinister, an unspoken test masked as amusement? She shook her head, a soft, polite refusal, her lips curling in a half-smile as she reached for her glass. But the moment the word no left her lips, something changed. The music, though still playing, seemed distant. The chatter around her became an eerie hush. Her husband's smile, once warm and inviting, faltered, then stiffened into something else entirely. His eyes, shadowed beneath the dim lights, darkened with something unrecognizable. Displeasure? Embarrassment? Or something far worse? The shift was imperceptible, but undeniable. The very air grew heavier, thick with something unseen, but deeply felt. The laughter of his friends echoed, too loud, too sharp, laced with something cruel. Then, before she could react, before she could even process what was happening, he moved. Hands that once traced the lines of her face with tenderness now gripped her wrist with an iron-like hold. The world tilted, her breath caught, and, in an instant, time splintered. Splash! The impact stole the breath from her lungs. Icy water swallowed her whole, a cruel contrast to the warmth of the evening. The weight of her soaked wedding gown dragged her down, wrapping around her like chains, as gasps erupted from the guests above. For a brief moment, beneath the rippling surface, silence engulfed her. A moment suspended between disbelief and realization. A moment where the fairy tale cracked, splintering into something unrecognizable. And then, as she broke the surface, coughing, gasping for air, the sound that greeted her wasn't the horrified screams of protest she had expected. No desperate hands reaching to pull her to safety. Instead, laughter. His laughter. Rich, deep, amused. Her husband, the man who had sworn to love and cherish her, stood at the edge of the pool, shaking his head, grinning as if this were nothing more than a joke, a moment of entertainment at her expense. She searched the faces around her, hoping for outrage, for sympathy, for someone, anyone, to see the cruelty of it all. But all she found were uneasy smirks, hesitant chuckles, and the lingering echoes of laughter that sliced through her like the cold of the water clinging to her skin. Humiliation settled in her chest like a stone, a weight far heavier than the water dripping from her trembling frame. And in that moment, as she stood there, drenched and exposed, she realized something that cut deeper than any wound. She was alone. Imagine standing before the one person who vowed to protect you, only to realize they're the very source of your deepest humiliation. The sting of betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet devastation, settling deep within your bones, unraveling everything you once believed in. It's the weight of broken trust pressing against your chest, the silent scream caught in your throat as you question, was it ever real? How do you reconcile love with cruelty? How do you move forward when the hands that once lifted you up have now thrown you down? Perhaps you've felt it before, that chilling moment when someone you cherished revealed a side of themselves you never saw coming. A moment that shattered the illusion, leaving you standing in the wreckage of what you thought was love. And the worst part, the bystanders, the ones who saw, who heard, who knew, and yet they laughed. They stayed silent. They let it happen. Because, to them, your pain was just another fleeting moment of entertainment. Have you ever felt invisible in your own suffering? Have you ever screamed internally, wondering if anyone truly sees you? If anyone would ever stand up for you? The pain of betrayal is not just in the act itself, but in the realization that the love you fought for was never the love you deserved. Drop a broken heart in the comments if this moment hit you deep. Let's talk about it. Let's stand together, because no one deserves to feel alone in their pain. Most would cry. Most would run. Most would let the shame consume them. But not her. She rose from that pool, graceful, unshaken, unstoppable. With water dripping from her hair, eyes burning with unspoken words, she walked straight to her husband, and in front of everyone, she did something no one expected. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer force of the moment. Each step forward sent ripples of unease through the crowd. The air stilled, the laughter died, and suddenly, he wasn't grinning anymore. Her voice, steady yet edged with something powerful, cut through the silence. And what she did next? What do you think she did next? Stay with me, because this is the moment that left everyone speechless. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. All eyes were on her, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. She lifted her trembling hand, the delicate wedding ring still glistening under the soft glow of the chandeliers. The very symbol of the vows she had taken, the vows he had shattered. And then she dropped it. The tiny metallic sound as it hit the ground echoed louder than the laughter that had surrounded her just moments before. But she wasn't done. With every ounce of dignity still intact, she stepped forward, ignoring the weight of the wet fabric clinging to her skin. The coldness of the night air did not compare to the fire now burning in her chest. She turned to the crowd, the same crowd that had laughed at her humiliation, and picked up the microphone, her fingers steady, her voice unwavering. A husband should lift his wife up, not throw her down. And I will never stay with a man who finds joy in my pain. The silence that followed was deafening. Faces turned pale, drinks were set down, and the once amused guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The laughter was gone. The shame, however, remained. Then, slowly began applause. Soft at first, then growing, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Women clapped. Men looked away, their gazes filled with shame. And her husband? He stood frozen, his face drained of color, realization dawning upon him too late. Because in that moment, he lost something far more valuable than he had ever realized: her love, her trust, and the respect of everyone around him. She could have stayed, could have swallowed the humiliation, forcing a smile as though nothing had happened. Could have convinced herself that it was just a joke, that he didn't mean it. But she didn't. With steady hands, she wrung the water from her dress. With steady breath, she lifted her chin. And with unwavering resolve, she turned away, not just from him, but from everything he represented. She walked out, drenched but undefeated. A woman who knew her worth. A woman who refused to be silenced. A woman who had reclaimed her power in the most profound way possible. And, as she stepped away from that party, she wasn't just leaving behind a wedding. She was walking away from a life that no longer served her. The world outside was vast, open, filled with possibilities that stretched beyond the narrow confines of that moment. And as she disappeared into the night, her heart, though bruised, beat with the promise of something greater. A future where she would never again be reduced to a spectacle. A future where she would be cherished, respected, and free. Have you ever walked away from something toxic and never looked back? Let's hear your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today.